The Gulf War began on August 2nd, 1990 at 2 a.m. when Iraqi armored and mechanized divisions crossed the Iraq-Kuwait border in a surprise attack.
This aggression came just hours after Saddam Hussein specifically assured numerous countries in the area that there would be no invasion.
They reached Kuwait City in only 3 hours, and with the assistance of Iraqi special forces deployed by helicopter, closed off all escape from the city. Once reinforced, Saddam Hussein's invaders conquered the sovereign nation of Kuwait in less than 48 hours.
Saddam Hussein is literally trying to wipe a country off the face of the earth. We do not exaggerate, nor do we exaggerate when we say Saddam Hussein will fail.
On August 8th, in response to the invasion, the United States deployed units from the Army's 82nd Airborne Division. This began Operation Desert Shield. To support the growing U.S. presence, units from the 11th Air Defense Artillery Brigade, commanded by Colonel Joseph Skip Garrett from Fort Bliss, were deployed.
The colonel called me. I couldn't believe that we were actually deploying. He said, "So Major, we're leaving." And I said, "Sir, are you kidding?" And he said, "No, not kidding."
Using the Patriot Advanced Capability 2 anti-ballistic missile system, these forces were tasked with protecting coalition forces from air and missile threats. Once they arrived, 6 batteries from the 2nd Battalion, 7th ADA, deployed to protect the coastal areas of Saudi Arabia from Al Jubail to just south of Dhahran. 3 Patriot batteries from the 3rd Battalion, 43rd ADA, defended U.S. air bases around Riyadh.
So we went from a complete state of peace and training to deployed and out the door in 9 days. I remember this as we were walking the tac site to kind of check on things like grounding rods and cable wires being buried and stuff like that, that we looked up at our launcher that had the 2 PAC-2 missiles on it and spray painted on the side of the canister were the words, "For experimental use only." And one of my first missions to the first sergeant that day was to get some spray paint and to spray over that, because it was not the message that we wanted our soldiers to be thinking about, nor any of our coalition partners. We had superseded the experimental phase and we were moving right into the operational phase.
In September 1990, the brigade formed Task Force Scorpion to protect the 18th Airborne Corps from conventional and possible chemical ballistic missile threats and air attack from Iraq. By 1991, President Bush had sent 430,000 troops to Saudi Arabia to lead the UN-sponsored coalition to protect the country from Iraqi aggression.
Both the 11th ADA Brigade and also the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment. And then thereafter, other units, National Guard, for example, were activating training at Fort Bliss, and we deployed them too.
Iraq and its leaders must be held liable for these crimes of abuse and destruction.
After Saddam Hussein failed to meet the UN Security Council's deadline of January 15, 1991, for Iraq to withdraw from Kuwait, Congress gave approval for a massive air attack against military targets in Iraq and occupied Kuwait. This began Operation Desert Storm.
Tonight, 28 nations, countries from 5 continents, Europe and Asia, Africa and the Arab League, have forces in the Gulf area standing shoulder to shoulder against Saddam Hussein. These countries had hoped the use of force could be avoided. Regrettably, we now believe that only force will make him leave.
Air defense from Fort Bliss has stepped to the forefront in Operation Desert Storm. Welcome to News 7.
Troops from a Patriot missile battery of the 2nd Battalion, 7th Air Defense Artillery shot down an Iraqi Scud missile last night. The Scud probably lifted off from a mobile missile site in Iraq that managed to survive massive Allied air attacks on the first day of the war.
It was fired at Dhahran, a major Saudi Arabian city on the country's eastern coastline along the Persian Gulf. Defending that city is a Patriot missile battery of the 2nd Battalion, 7th Air Defense Artillery, one unit from the 11th ADA Brigade of Fort Bliss.
Pretty excited after it happened. We are the first Patriot battery in the history of the world to knock down a Scud missile.
It's very loud, and it's also very quick. The system, the launchers itself will take off, and you probably don't hear the noise until the missile is well on its way. It just travels that fast.
On 26 February 1991, after nearly 6 months of bombing and missile attacks, the U.S.-led coalition commenced a massive ground attack on Iraqi Republican Guard forces entrenched around Kuwait.
What we have seen is a redoubling of Saddam Hussein's efforts to destroy completely Kuwait and its people. I have therefore directed General Norman Schwarzkopf, in conjunction with coalition forces, to use all forces available, including ground forces, to eject the Iraqi army from Kuwait. Once again, this was a decision made only after extensive consultations within our coalition partnership.
Coalition armored and mechanized forces were too much for President Saddam Hussein and his battered army. The ground offensive ended in just 4 days. The official ceasefire was declared on February 28, 1991, with Baghdad agreeing to UN terms, although Saddam Hussein remained in power. Iraq withdrew from Kuwait, though not before setting fire to more than 500 Kuwaiti oil wells, literally setting the country on fire, resulting in massive environmental damage to the region.
As soon as the ceasefire was announced and the documentation had been exchanged between the U.S. and Iraqi military authorities, CENTCOM began to release the units to come back. And of course, not unlike when World War II ended in Europe or in the Pacific, you know, everybody wanted to come home at once, and that wasn't possible.
The single most exciting moment in my military career, when the plane touched ground at Biggs Army Airfield and we were able to look out the window and literally thousands of people, soldiers from Fort Bliss and the El Paso community, had all come out to welcome us home. And I remember it like it was yesterday.
Welcome home, heroes of Operation Desert Storm.
The first troops coming off the plane, and if there was any kind of organization and any attempt to keep the crowd at the back, all of that has gone out the window, because the crowd, the families, they are all rushing towards the airplane and the steps and looking around frantically to find any member of their family to greet them.
You were an integral part of the most brilliant military campaign in the history of this great nation. All Americans burst with pride in your accomplishments. You had grassroots support of the American people consistently since the day you left. It never wavered. El Paso cheers your return. Fort Bliss cheers your return. And especially your families cheer your return.
Who gave that right to me, and I gladly stand 'cause there ain't no doubt